What is poppin' YouTube? We are doing my must-buy players for Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you like Dynasty Fantasy Football, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're new, let's go. My first must-buy player is going to be Tee Higgins. Tee Higgins, there's a lot that is going around him heading into the 2024 offseason, where we're looking at Tee Higgins as a free agent with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, there's a few different options for my guy Tee Higgins. He could end up somewhere where he is the clear wide receiver one, like a Kansas City or a Houston Texans, or he stays with the Cincinnati Bengals, where he is paired with Joe Burrow, maybe the 1B to Jamar Chase's 1A, and that's maybe not as ideal as we'd like, because as we've seen with Tee Higgins, his dynasty career, his whole career has kind of been a little bit of up and down. He came into the league. We liked that he was a big-bodied wide receiver out of Clemson University, taken with that first pick in the second round. But he has dealt with a ton of injuries over his career. If we look at his overall statistics, 16 games played, 14 games played, 17 games played, 12 games played this last year. And you might say to me, well, Caleb, he played in a ton of games. He left a lot of games with injury. He always seemed to pull a hammy, where then he got pulled out of the game, and he just wasn't producing great fantasy football points for you. If we're looking at his career, 12.2 fantasy points per game, 15.7 fantasy points per game, 13.1 fantasy points per game, 11.5 fantasy points per game this last year, which was wide receiver 40. So he's finished anywhere between wide receiver 12 to wide receiver 40 on a points per game basis. So a lot of people are going to say that he's just a high-end wide receiver 2, middling wide receiver 2, nothing more. Why are you telling me to buy him in Dynasty Fantasy Football? So first, we have the potential that he is going to change situation. If that were to take place, I think when we're looking at his target share, I mean, his highest target share he's had in his career so far has been 111 targets, which is not great. A lot of people were bashing DJ Moore when he got traded to the Bears this last season because they said, how is he going to get to 120 targets? Tee Higgins, he's put up middling stats with 111 targets. That's when he put up a wide receiver 26 finish when he had 111 targets. So I'm excited to see if he could get in an offense where maybe he's a little bit more of the focal point. We're talking about Tee Higgins as someone that could be commanding 130 to 135 targets, being the alpha level wide receiver. If we look at KTC for where he's valued appropriately right now, he's right now as wide receiver 19. And with him being wide receiver 19, there's some guys around him like Jordan Addison, Michael Pittman Jr., Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, JSN. And I know there are some studs in there. There's some future potential with some rookies there. But when I'm looking at Tee Higgins, I'm thinking, if he were to sign with the Kansas City, what is that going to do to his overall value? If he re-signs with a pretty big deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, what is that going to do to his overall value? I think right now he's kind of priced at his floor. I know there's a ton of potential baked in because a lot of people like Tee Higgins. They like the measurables that he does present. But for me, I'm definitely targeting Tee Higgins in my leagues. I've already started to send out offers, especially if you maybe have some better higher end running back. I got a few teams where I built a ton of running backs where I have like Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Kenneth Walker, Travis Etienne. I am trying to pair one of those guys like a Travis Etienne, send that out and go get Tee Higgins because I like Tee Higgins' overall potential over the next 3 seasons depending on where he does sign. My next must-buy player is going to be Garrett Wilson. And if you've been any fan of the channel, you know I got the Garrett Wilson jersey here behind me. You also know that I've been a big Garrett Wilson truther believer from the jump. I was drafting Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver 1 over Drake London in the few classes ago when he was a rookie back in 2022. And yes, that maybe necessarily hasn't panned out. I mean, he's been better than Drake London. But last season, we were super excited. We saw the preseason with him and Aaron Rodgers. We're like, finally, he has a quarterback. He's not going to be stuck in Zack Wilson purgatory. What happens? His season pretty much ends the second Aaron Rodgers' first 5 seconds with the Jets ends with that Achilles tear. And it was just super depressing because even though ended up having a really great season, 12.5 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 32 with that horrific quarterback play, we look at his measurables of what he did this last season, and they are just super impressive. I mean, in 17 games played, 168 targets, 95 receptions, 1,042 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, 1,700 air yards. So he had a huge amount of air yards, a huge amount of targets. He was the wide receiver 4 in targets last season, which is absolutely crazy to say. Wide receiver 7 on a target share, wide receiver 6 in snap share, wide receiver 1 on routes run, and wide receiver 1 in route participation. Also had a 42.7% air yard share, which was wide receiver 3. So when we're looking at his metrics, I mean, this guy, when he's on the field, he's getting targeted. And so when we've seen Aaron Rodgers with a guy like Devontae Adams, he is always getting the ball. We saw Devontae Adams have some of his best career years with Aaron Rodgers. So I think with Garrett Wilson heading into 2024, I know we can't expect Aaron Rodgers to be back to full Aaron Rodgers health, but if he can just have some type of capable quarterback play, I think we are looking at Garrett Wilson as a guy that's going to be entering that wide receiver 4 to wide receiver 5 range, a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And right now, he's appropriately priced at wide receiver 6. So if I can go buy Garrett Wilson, like we said, for guys like a Sam Laporta, for like maybe a Christian McCaffrey, even like a guy like AJ Brown, go send that to get Garrett Wilson, get a little bit younger. I think we're looking on the verge of Garrett Wilson being an absolute stud. We even compared last offseason, we compared Garrett Wilson's rookie year to Justin Jefferson's rookie year. And really the only difference between those two amazing seasons was the fact that Justin Jefferson had Kirk Cousins, had a way better quarterback play play, but if you look at the targets, you look at the air yard share, all of those things really line up to the fact that we could have argued that going into year 2, Garrett Wilson could have finished as the wide receiver 1. Now, you can say that about pretty much any wide receiver on any given year, but if you looked at the metric, they were super great. And so I am still riding the Garrett Wilson bandwagon heading into 2024. My next buy is going to be Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Jonathan Taylor, like I said, these guys are not all going to be cheap here on KTC. When we're looking at where Jonathan Taylor currently slides in on the KTC rankings, he is player overall 36. He is running back 5 at 25 years old. And you might be saying to me, Caleb, 25, he's approaching that 26 age cliff. Like, shouldn't I be looking to get out? Why are you looking to buy Jonathan Taylor? I think what Jonathan Taylor has shown is he has one of those elite level bell cow type builds where my man, when he's on the field, he can just handle everything. I mean, 15.6 fantasy points per game put him as RB12 this last season. He hasn't hit that RB1 mark since 2021. Now, granted, he has been injured the last 2 years. In 2022, only played 11 games. This last year, only played 10 because, as a lot of you guys will know, as you were heading into redraft season, my man was on the pup and you were trying to figure out where to draft him in your leagues. But when he came back, he looked absolutely electric. So 169 rush attempts, 741 yards, 4.4 yards per carry, 19 receptions for 153 yards, 8 total touchdowns. Now, a lot of people are worried heading into 2024 with Anthony Richardson coming off of his injury that Jonathan Taylor might not be getting the goal line work. So that 8 touchdowns is probably going to go down is what a lot of people are saying. So a lot of people are saying he's not going to get the 8 and he's not going to get the 20 like he got in 2021 when he was the overall RB1. So Caleb, where's his overall upside? Well, my thing is, I think with Anthony Richardson coming in, not only is that going to increase his yards per carry because you have to respect Anthony Richardson's legs, but we're in the goal line. Of course, some of those goal line carries are going to be stolen by Anthony Richardson, but I think they're going to be at the goal line a lot more than they were this last season, which is going to furthermore project Jonathan Taylor to get more total touchdowns next year. I could easily see Jonathan Taylor finishing as an RB6 to RB8 next year. And yes, as a dynasty asset, he will continue to decline just because of the ageism that we do play with in this game that we all love. But if I can still go trade, like we said, like a Devontae Smith and get Jonathan Taylor, a DJ Moore and get Jonathan Taylor, even trading Kyron Williams after that amazing season that he just had this last year and go get someone like Jonathan Taylor, those are moves that I'm looking to do to go try to buy Jonathan Taylor because I think he's just an absolute fabulous buy right now in fantasy football. My next buy is going to be George Pickens out of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as you guys may have known if you've been tuning into the channel for a while, I'm a huge Deontay Johnson truther. But let's be clear, Deontay Johnson will be a free agent this season, and he will most likely be walking away because the Pittsburgh Steelers have been very clear in not only their uses, but their tone, the way that they talk about him in interviews. They're not a big fan of the guy. So George Pickens will immediately step into that alpha level role that he kind of already started to step into this season, where he finished with 12.3 fantasy points per game, finished as the wide receiver 36, 17 games, 106 targets, 63 receptions, and George Pickens was living in absolute quarterback purgatory with Kenny Pickett, with Mitch Trubisky, with Mason Rudolph this season. I mean, it was just absolutely atrocious for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They need to find their quarterback. So maybe they trade for Justin Fields if the Caleb Williams is going to the Bears. Maybe they go after someone like a Ryan Tannehill, but anything is going to be better than what he currently had with Kenny Pickett. And so there's not really a whole lot that we can look at into his metrics, really, besides the fact that he was wide receiver 1 on route participation. If he was in the game, they're throwing the ball, wide receiver 10 in deep targets. There's a lot of exciting, like I said, stats, George Pickens, but really, I really like his value with the potential that he is going to be this alpha level receiver heading into 2024. When we're pulling up KTC, he's the wide receiver 26 on KTC. So there's guys around him like a Deebo Samuel, like a Tajay Spears, like even like a mid 2026 first, you would have to trade to go get George Pickens. And I think that is all appropriate pricing, even like in Isaiah Pacheco, where we've seen the alpha level build that George Pickens does possess. Are there things that maybe we would hope that are better in his game? Sure. But I think when you're getting a value like this with George Pickens, I think it's an absolute fabulous place to be. My next option buy for you right now is we're gonna be talking about some picks. We'll go deeper into this and topic in another video, but I really do think right now, if you're looking to buy 2024 picks, right now is the time. They've been increasing in value. They're only gonna be increasing in value. So it's not like, hey, let's wait until the draft. Let's see in the combine where people are gonna land. If you wait until that point to go try to trade up, to go make those moves, like it's already too late. You're gonna be paying an extra premium. You're already paying a premium right now because the season has ended. So I am just saying, go buy those picks right now if I am you. If I'm smart, and this is something that not a lot of managers start to think about, what's cheaper right now are 2025 picks because it's a year away, it's out of sight, out of mind. And so maybe you have a loaded roster and you're at the 104 and you're like, hey, I'm looking at the list and there's 7 good players that I could really see myself taking. Why don't I trade down from the 104 to 107, pick up an additional 2025 first? Like those are moves that I am looking to do right now because the 2025 first are so stinking cheap. I'm looking right now on KTC, and we're looking at 2025 first. Like a late 2025 first is around like overall 71. So in the same range as like a George Pickens. Like that's someone that I would like. A 2025 mid first is like around 57. The thing that I like about 2025, like right now, a lot of people are discounting 2025. They're saying it's not as good of a class. And like, yes, can we really project that far out? Sometimes. Like I know we were looking in 2023 and we said, hey, we think the 2024 class is going to be so much better. But then Travion Henderson, Emeka Ibuka end up returning to school. It's still a very strong class, but things change on a year-to-year basis in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So if I'm you, I'm looking at those 2025 first, and I'm looking at those as gold, because if I can attach myself to one of those picks, boom, bada boom, you better believe things are going down. So I like those picks, and those are some more buys that I would be trying to have. My next buy is going to be Hollywood Brown from the Arizona Cardinals. I think the experiment of Hollywood Brown as the wide receiver 1 is kind of over. He definitely is more of a wide receiver 2 in an offense, more like a Tee Higgins, and needs his Jamar Chase next to him. But this last year really wasn't that great, with only 9.6 fantasy points per game. Put him as wide receiver 49. In the 14 games, still had 101 targets, 51 receptions, but the receiving yards were way down this year compared to previous years. And really, he really hasn't had a year like he had in 2021 when he was the wide receiver 21. And so a lot of people are worried about Hollywood Brown. You know, he is 26. He will be turning 27 this year, but I still think Hollywood Brown still has a lot of good football left. Kyler Murray being back for a full offseason. What are they going to do in the draft? Are they going to be able to get a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. to come in, help Hollywood Brown take some of that pressure off of Hollywood Brown? Maybe Michael Wilson takes that next step, but I still think Hollywood Brown is such a cheap asset to acquire that's going to be worth your time. Hollywood Brown currently right now on KTC is wide receiver 43. So guys around him are Isaiah Likely, a mid-second, Matty Boy Stafford, Joe Mixon, Kendre Miller, Nick Chubb. Take that shot on Hollywood Brown that he can blow up. We've seen him have those games where he can just absolutely elevate himself, have a huge, big blow-up game. So I like some Hollywood Brown. I think he's a guy that you should be targeting. My last and final buy for this video is going to be Zack Charbonnet. Zachy Boy Charbonnet, drafted in the second round of the Seattle Seahawks. A lot of people were worried last year about Zack Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker. How was that workload going to go? Clearly, Kenneth Walker was still the back to own. Zack Charbonnet, 6.6 fantasy points per game. And you might be saying to me, Caleb, why do I need to go buy Zack Charbonnet? Because he's cheaper this year than he was last year, even though we all knew the situation that Zack Charbonnet was walking into. And when we're looking at the second round drafted running backs, I mean, he will be taking over for Kenneth Walker at some point. And we've seen Kenneth Walker just not be able to stay healthy. RB20 right now is where he's priced. Like Brian Robinson Jr. or Zack Charbonnet, who would you rather have for the next 2 seasons? I would bet Zack Charbonnet. Cole Kmet or Zack Charbonnet? Give me Zack Charbonnet. Romeo Doubs or Zack Charbonnet? Give me Zack Charbonnet. I like Zack Charbonnet and his overall upside that's going to be coming with the Seattle Seahawks. They're getting a new offensive coordinator. We're excited to see Jackson Smith and Jigba continue to step up. Geno Smith had himself quite the down year this last year. So, and Zack Charbonnet, when you look at player profiler, compared primarily to DeMarco Murray, none of you guys remember his amazing seasons with the Cowboys. And then I think he had like one good season with the Titans, but he got a huge contract. I just like the second round drafted running back. 23.1 is his age, so still only 23 years old. He reminds me a lot of kind of the career trajectory of James Cook, where maybe he had a middling year the first year, and a lot of people started to write him off because of the situation, because of all the mouths to feed in the offense. But I just think Zack Charbonnet is just getting himself going. I know he's more of a bruiser than anything else. He had a really high catch rate this last season, even though he wasn't necessarily all the way down on third downs. Running back 21 on a breakaway run rate. Yards per touch was running back 14. He was creating a ton when he got the ball. I just think you give him another year in this offense. I know there's a ton of turmoil change that's happened with the Seattle Seahawks, but give me some Zack Charbonnet. Drafted in that second round. We like the second round running backs heading forward. So like I said, some of those rankings where you could trade like a Cole Kmet, a Brian Robinson, even like a JMO to go get Zack Charbonnet, I think those are all moves that I'd be looking to do if I'm trying to beef up my RB room. So I appreciate you so much if you tuned in this far. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're new, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.